Hey everyone, it's Jessica Miller-Merrill. I'm the founder of Workology and the creator of the ACE, the HR exam. Being a socially responsible company can positively impact a company's customer and employer brand. We've had a lot of conversations around corporate social responsibility, or CSR, and why that matters. But I wanted to talk to you about the basics of CSR and how a formal CSR program can be great for our employees, our company, and sustainability. So I am so excited to have Wendy Rentseller join us today to talk about why corporate social responsibility is important for HR. Wendy, and this is the other amazing part about having her as a guest, she is currently the head of corporate social responsibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion for BMC Software. She also has a background in human resources, so she knows what it's like in the trenches and all about things HR. So welcome, Wendy. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm very delighted to be here today to talk about corporate social responsibility and all the wonderful things that can go along with it. So,
Awesome. Well, let's get to it. Let's talk about the basics. How would you describe CSR to me if I had never heard about it before?
yeah, so just so everyone knows, too, it is a relatively new concept. I get asked that question very often, even though many organizations have had corporate social responsibility for quite some time. It has become more of an emerging topic as of late with the global pandemic, Black Lives Matter, the apocalypse basically of 2020. So corporate social responsibility is an organization's footprint within the communities in which they do business, giving back to those communities. And corporate social responsibility can mean different things for each organization, but for BMC Software, under our umbrella of corporate social responsibility, we have all of our philanthropic work. We have our diversity, equity, and inclusion programming. We also have our sustainability, net zero, carbon footprint. And then we also do our governance around ESG, or environmental societal governance, which is a very, very hot topic as well, especially when it comes to the investor community and organizations looking for funding and whatnot. So, bottom line on top, corporate social responsibility is an organization's giving back efforts within all of those arenas that I've just described, and in creating a more equitable world is ideally what the topic is. And they're all of these programs are supposed to be rooted in the United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals. There are 17 of those, and really all of the things I just mentioned are layered on top. That's the foundation of all the work any of these organizations would do.
I'm so happy that you mentioned ESG, and I'm glad it's in the HR conversation. I was just talking to somebody in a prep call for a future podcast on HR metrics in line with the ISO around HR and human capital reporting. And a lot of the conversation was focused on ESGs. And I like how this ties in to all these different things. And you're absolutely right. Investors, stockholders love hearing about the economic and social and the growth tie-ins.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too, as you are working with human resources professionals in this emerging world that is the future of work is now, right? It's so important to understand that business acumen is so important to your role now as a human resources professional. You have to be aware of these things. You have to understand the ROI of DEI. You need to be able to monetize and also empathize in all the programs that you build, because you want to be a resource to the humans within your organization, but you need to be able to have a business case and business plan aligned to that.
I want to talk a little bit more about CSR and the differences between CSR and philanthropic efforts, because I think that sometimes people get those really confused, or they think they're both or the same thing, I guess. What's the difference?
Yeah, so corporate social responsibility is the idea of leaning into those United Nations Sustainable Development Goals looking at your business through that lens, and then creating a strategy with all of the aforementioned uh, programs that go underneath that, and how you as an organization can give back to the community. So for example, at BMC Software, we're a technology company, so our corporate social responsibility makes sense with a technology component tie-in. So we want to do work that is going to elevate digital literacy, accessibility, and interventions globally. Because when we invest in communities where the majority of our workforce is going to be, and in the future, we are creating sustainability not only for our business, but for the world in which we work. So when you tie it back to those sustainable goals that I was mentioning before, with the lens of what you do as an organization, that it's a philosophy. Whereas philanthropic work is, we donated this amount of dollars to this organization and that's it. It's just that there's no philosophy behind it. It's just giving and not more strategic. I would say too, corporate social responsibility also is known as corporate citizenship. However, that is not as it's not as a commonly used term as it used to be. So.
Awesome. Well, okay, so let's talk about a topic that is going to be on your HR certification exam when it comes to corporate social responsibility, and that's the CSR Maturity Model. So just kind of walk us through some basics about that and maybe what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So the CSR maturity model is a continuum, just like any program that you are implementing as an HR professional. It's iterative, it builds on itself over time. So as I mentioned earlier, the philanthropic piece is that first level of just basic CSR model. You probably, if you're at that level within your organization, there's not probably a lot of awareness around like the UN sustainable goals. You're just really doing giving and maybe some one-off giving back volunteerism. So that's kind of the level one. And as your organization becomes more hyper focused around tying it to those universal goals around sustainability, and also you're getting a department going, you've got people committed to it, you're moving into like more of that strategic, where you're working in hand with your people and spaces groups, your environments, the health and safety, and you're prioritizing those sustainability developmental goals and tying them back to your business. um, you move on from there into more like competitive, and then like the last piece is transformational. But a competitive example would be, you're now leaning into these goals. You have a strategy on a national or a global level in which you're empowering your employees through volunteerism and giving back. It's tied to your employee engagement. We're a software company, so some of the things that we do around building our products to be ethical and without bias is something that's very important in creating those equitable workspaces. So being aware of algorithmic bias is something that's really important to us, and that's leaning into those sustainable developmental goals that have now come through to where we're competitive. And then that last piece is that transformational piece, where you're starting to see the impact of how your CSR model and the workflow of which you've become strategic, you've become competitive, and now you're transformational in the communities in which you do work. And so another example of that would be, we do quite a bit of work in our India location. India by 2050 will have the largest workforce. So it is so important to invest in the workforce of our future. And so the transformational work we do are getting devices in the hands of the underserved community, educating and economic empowerment of women. Um, Financial literacy, those things are so important, because these are the people that will help us to continue as an organization in the future. So that's when it becomes transformational in your CSR work.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And when we replay this, I'm just thinking like we're gonna add some images so they'll be able to see while you're talking what the maturity model looks like for CSR, and then the different levels. So if you saw that pop up, that didn't happen live, but we have that image there for you so that we can try to translate the visual with the audio kind of in and bring it all together. I would like to know why is suddenly CSR so important? Because this is a new addition to HR certification body of knowledge. Why is this important for businesses, and why the increase in just attention on CSR?
Yeah, no, that's a great question and kind of ties back to a couple of things that I mentioned earlier around having the business acumen as an HR professional. The majority of the financial decisions that will be made over the next 15 to 20 and even 30 years, those decision makers are Gen Z and millennials. And Gen Z in particular only want to do business with organizations that are demonstrating corporate philanthropy, creating equitable workspaces, economic empowerment, and sustainability, a lot around the environment. And so, as an organization, in order for you to survive in this new world of work that has taken shape over a weekend, before when I did future of work consulting, I would go into engagements with an organization and we would talk about like 3, 5, 10-year plans. COVID did that all over a weekend. And now we're in this place where we've really got to be intentional around how we monetize ourselves, the products we build, the products we deliver, the opportunities we're giving, and how we're demonstrating that in current state, future state, and how people will look at us historically, right, as an organization. So it's so important. And that is why that lens has become hyper focused, because these people, I am a millennial, I'm an older one, but the millennials and Gen Z, this is where they're going to do their business in dollars. There is not a day that goes by that I do not get an inquiry around our ESG, our CSR work, our DEI initiatives from a current client, a prospective client, our investors, and the candidate journey. This is essential for your employer branding. And in order to be competitive, it's not only the right thing to do, but it is the business imperative of our time. So the world is just changing in the way in which we invest.
I love that you mentioned employer branding and recruiting. Like, there's so many different pieces that HR is involved in, and CSR is impacting the larger business, but our recruiting efforts, our retention efforts, customer, it's
Internal
entire, yeah.
mobility, it just touches everything. Digitize, the employee experience is so important within an organization, and on average most organizations largest cost, on average 70% of most organizations largest cost is their human capital. So being able to demonstrate this not only externally but internally, and elevating employee engagement through these types of initiatives of CSR work is extremely important. There's also a really great diagram that you can Google around like how CSR programs tie into the entire workflow of employee engagement, retention, mobility, that which leads to drives innovation within your groups when you're creating more equitable workspaces, which leads you to be on the forefront of products, especially in software that's so important. So um, it's a very exciting time. And 15 years ago when I was an advocate for this type of work, people really did not see the value in it. And now to be someone that people come to often to talk to about it has been like one of the joys of my life, to finally see that being a good person and doing the right thing by people is an advantageous way for you to do business.
Yeah, our moms were right, right? Finally.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, how does your company, BMC Software, model CSR and sustainability through different programs like BMC Cares?
Yeah, so we do a lot of work globally around what I'd mentioned before, investing in the future workforce, those digital literacy interventions, accessibility, and accessibility, interventions, literacy. Those are the three things. When cell phones became very prevalent in the world, as an example, and in America, we toss aside 125 million a year alone every time that new iPhone comes out, or the Samsung or whatever. Display Collecting that and disposing of it, or it just laying around, doesn't do anything for anyone. So the ability to repurpose these items through our device drives and get them in the hands of frontline COVID workers, or recycle them and use the high valued minerals that are inside them to put into other phones, so that there's conservation and we're not killing gorillas. I mean, there's just so many different ways that we have inserted the technology component throughout the life cycle of our BMC Cares program to really tie into like that philosophy of our CSR work. We do a lot of mentorship. Mentorship is so important. Representation matters, and we recognize that when people see people that look like them, being a software engineer, being an executive, that they are empowered and feel like that they can do that as well. And so those are the things that we keep top of mind in everything that we do. We also align our virtual volunteerism through our ERGs, so our employee resource groups. So for instance, our Pride group, we curate virtual volunteerism to support the Trevor Project, where you can work as a crisis counselor and take inbound calls, talking to people that are going through a journey maybe that you've gone through. It's also a really opportunity to have your own catharsis through mentorship. I enjoy it myself. So we try to weave in the DEI and the CSR together, not only internally for our own employees' growth, but externally into the communities that we work in through that digital intervention mentorship. And our slogan is the autonomous digital enterprise, and we want to make sure that autonomous digital enterprise includes everyone.
I love that. One last question for you. When we were kind of doing our prep call, we talked about a CSR program or something that had been happening at BMC that really wasn't in alignment with this bigger picture strategy. Can you give us an example of one? And the mattresses is the one that's coming to mind.
Yeah.
Because
So yeah. I've been with BMC for, at this point in time, about 3 months. But one of my initial goals coming in was just to kind of, they were doing a lot of really great work all over the world, but it just really didn't tie into the organization. And we know just from like empirical data, evidence, and impact, that study after study shows that when you tie your CSR work to what you do as a business, it has a more significant impact. You get more buy-in, you have higher employer engagement, you are helping more beneficiaries in the communities that you work in. So one of the things that we were doing is we had an initiative in one of our countries where we were purchasing mattresses. And for me, I'm like, this is incredible. And certainly you can do this on your own time, but Mattress Firm should probably be the one doing this type of work. And that really kind of was like a catalyst of, looking at all the programs that we were involved in and seeing if a lot of times, sometimes there is a technology component that you can work with that NGO around to say like, hey, this is our focus now. And so do you have any programs where we can tie in a technology component? Because that's what makes sense for us. But when it doesn't really make any sense for you, the impact is not as significant, and it is not helping your business at the end of the day. I always encourage people, though, if you are really, there are a lot of causes that I'm passionate about that have nothing to do with BMC, so I would never bring them into the fold here. But I always encourage people to continue to do the work that they do, and then we give you the opportunity to do other philanthropic work that has a technology lens to it.
awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Because I feel like this is an example of a corporate social responsibility program that really wasn't in alignment with the bigger mission of the organization.
Yeah, and I would say too that a lot of times these efforts are grassroots, and that's awesome. And when you get to a point as an organization where you really want to formalize your CSR programs, you want to take all these stakeholders and like hear what they have to say, and you want to bring them on board. You just don't want to shut it down like we're not doing that anymore. You talk about the business case, you bring them to the table, you include them in the conversation, right? What diversity is a fact, inclusion is an act, right? And then you can mobilize and activate your groups of folks to help you perpetuate the missions that you want to do. I also really encourage people as they look at organizations they want to do business with. I've been on the board of a nonprofit before. Transparently, sometimes there is not a lot of strong business acumen, and certainly we all see the Sarah McLachlan commercial with the arms of the angel and the dog, and you're so sad, and like it's very depressing, and you automatically give. But and I get that tugging on the heartstrings, but I so encourage you to please make sure you do your financial due diligence on the NGOs you work with. Some people, their heart really is in the right place, but they just have no business or financial acumen. So in India, for example, the government regulates and requires that you, at a certain level of an organization, you have to contribute a certain percentage of your revenue to giving back within the country, and their regiment and requirements around that is for like every 95 cents on the dollar that you contribute, that 95 cents has to go to programs. So there is a lot more overhead, in some of these US based programs. So please make sure I use like the 80 cents rule. Like if they are not contributing more than 80 cents on the dollar towards actual programs, either ask them for a corrective action plan, the NGO, or find another NGO that is maximizing their dollars more.
Perfect. Well, thank you for all your just the resources that you shared and hearing you talk, because for a lot of people, this might be the first time, I hope not, but it might be the first time that they've heard someone who is in a role within an organization that is corporate social responsibility. I wanted to ask you where people can go to connect with you and learn more about the programs that that BMC is doing as part of CSR.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say our BMC Corporate Social Responsibility Report is probably the most downloaded external marketing collateral we have from our website. So BMC Software Corporate Social Responsibility Report, that'll pop up immediately when you Google it. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Wendy Rentschler. You can connect with me on Twitter and Instagram as well. My handles are a lot easier to spell on those. It's Future of Hiring. So Future of Hiring on Instagram and Twitter. And I am always putting out a lot of content. I am a micro learner, and so I need things in 140 characters or in pictures. So lots of really great work there. And I'll actually put on my Twitter and my Instagram some of these CSR maturity models and like the workflow and the circle of life of the employee experience too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Wendy. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
Yes, thank you so much, Jessica, for having me. And good luck to all of you on your certification exam. I know how scary and exciting that can be.
Hopefully it's a positive result for all our students, and you have made that a lot easier when it comes to corporate social responsibility.
Absolutely. Thank you.